When the young alien lady grew up, the human joked that he would marry her. Years later, she returned to Commander Derek Fry, wiped out. The perspiration from his forehead as he fastened the last bolt on the outpost hangar's broken thruster assembly. Even with the environmental systems operating at full capacity following 12 hours of non-stop activity, Epsilon 9 was oppressively hot. Under his bulky grey armor, his muscles ached. Now, they were strained by coolant and engine grease, which should do it, he mumbled, himself taking a step back to appreciate his work. The fixes weren't attractive, but they would serve as the chief engineers. He had learnt to get by as a pilot for the Human Expeditionary Army on Lumria. Lumria's limited resources were the first significant diplomatic triumph for humanity since humanoid species with exquisite lavender skin, the Lumrians are joining the Galactic Confederation. The human delegation had been warmly received by technological prowess. In contrast to, the Lumrians appeared to be very interested by other extraterrestrial races that treated humans with distrust or downright animosity. With his mind focused on the impending trip 3 months from now, Earth culture, Derek packed his tools into their case. He had contemplated prolonging his tour because of the stunning globe, but the brass wanted him to follow orders. When they returned to Arcturus Station at the end of the month, the voice was so quiet that Derek nearly missed it. "Excuse me, sir." When he turned, he saw a young Lumrian girl standing at the hangar bay's edge, her big violet eyes staring at him with her gleaming eyes and obvious interest, she couldn't have been older than 8 or 9 by human standards. Derek remarked, "Well, hello there," putting down his tools and stroking his hair that appeared to shine in the artificial light. "You're not supposed to be in here, little one." "It's dangerous," I said, bending to reach her eye level. "Look at the human ship," she said, her translator translating her lovely words into flawless English. "Papa," she said, "claims that people construct machines in a different way than we do." Derek grinned. "Your father is correct that we often prioritize functionality over form, but this elderly bird has a plenty of both." He pointed to the cruiser behind him, and the young girl gave a hesitant. She moved forward, her gaze never leaving Derek. "You're not like other people who come to see you. You work with your..." He laughed. "Someone has to keep the ships flying. Hands, the others just talk." She nodded solemnly as the man spoke, as though he had shared some deep wisdom, then bluntly. She spoke in a way that only a child could. "When I grow up, I want my husband to be a human man just like you." Derek laughed in spite of himself after, being taken aback by the comment. "Is that so? Well, when you grow into a beautiful woman, I swear I'll marry you." Playfully, the kind of innocuous joke that an adult may tell to make fun of a child's naive assertion came out. She nodded eagerly as her face brightened with joy, asking, "Imra, what's your name?" He responded with a fictitious salute. "Commander, Derek Fry at your service." She said, "Commander Derek Fry," as if she were learning it by heart. Someone searching for the girl cried out from outside the hangar. "I'll remember." Tia anxiously looked over her shoulder and whispered, "I have to go, but I'll find I swear to you when I'm an adult." Before Derek could reply, he shook his head, grinning, and fled, vanishing through the hangar doors as fast as she had emerged. He didn't know how, but the Encounter kids were the same throughout the galaxy, full of imagination and unattainable goals. His remarks would be taken seriously, and 10 years would pass in the blink of an eye before Earth and Lumria formed an alliance. Blossomed, resulting in the Lumrians' cultural enrichment and humankind's first ever technical advancement. After rising through the ranks, Derek assumed leadership of the permanent human presence on Laia at the age of 42, was still in his prime thanks to consistent exercise and cutting-edge medical care, guaranteeing his body was just as amazing as it had been 10 years earlier in the morning. Started off like any other Derek by getting to the hangar early and going over the maintenance records before the day shift came. His favorite part of the day was the peaceful seclusion of the early hours, when it was just him and the machine's commander. Fry's voice was confident and musical. with a trace of Derek turned, his breath caught in his throat as he stood in the hangar, listening to the translator's artificial undertone. A gorgeous Lemurian woman arrived, her snow-white hair falling down her face. She wore a form-fitting white dress with a plunging back that contrasted well with her light purple skin, exposed arms and legs that added to her chiseled body, and a neckline that ethereal beauty. But what really caught my attention were her big, violet eyes, him that brought up a long-forgotten memory. "Do I know you?" he questioned, putting down his smile played at the datapad as she walked forward, moving with grace and purpose. "You said you would marry me when I grew up." Derek froze his mouth as she said, "I'm grown now and you promised to marry me, and I've come so you can keep your word." As his thoughts raced to find her, he suddenly realized that she was the little girl from the hangar 10 years earlier. Previously, a child's amusing remark was returned as a legally obligated pledge to. His speech was scarcely audible beyond a whisper, Lyra, and her smile made you remember as he struggled to find the perfect words. Nice Derek ran a hand through his hair. "Look, Tira, I was only completing a pledge she made to him on my world, Commander. Pledges are precious bonds, especially those made to kids." She drew nearer, her violet eyes never leaving his. "I've been studying for this day for years. Traditions, learning your language without the use of interpreters, and even changing my diet to be." Derek stated he was backing up until he felt the same way about yours, which is devoted workbench behind him. "But you know I wasn't being serious, don't you? Comprehend human humor more thoroughly than the majority of Lumrians," Tira responded, avoiding an awkward situation. "I also see the value of human honor, and a man like you is undoubtedly a commander and a leader." Derek gulped hard since this was so awkward. He doesn't value his word. Even if it might have been a diplomatic blunder, something about her assurance and candor aroused. Something caught him off guard. The hangar doors opened and Lieutenant Parker strode in, but he stopped when he saw that the Lumrian High Council commander was Dererick, closed his eyes, and asked to see you about a marriage proposal. For a moment, their smiles turned victorious, and of course, they are taller. "Shall we go? I think that my future spouse and I have a lot to talk about with the council." As Dererick saw Lieutenant Parker's puzzled look as she turned to face the entrance, and he could only provide a feeble shrug in return. But in some way, a child's reckless vow had just turned into the most difficult situation. He pointed to the door and remarked, "This is the most diplomatic situation of my career, and possibly the most life-altering after you." Dererick couldn't help but notice Tarara's elegant hip swing as she walked forward. This was going to be a lengthy. The Lumrian High Council chamber was a marvel of architecture back then, with a huge dome of the floor was covered in prismatic patterns created by a polished blue stone that captured the light of Lumria's twin stars. As Derek walked in, 7 council members were seated in a semicircle on high seats, their faces unreadable. Commander Fry, in tone High Councillor Theron with Tyra by his side. We recognize that distinguished Lumrian, who has silver strands in his white hair, is delicate. Talk about Dererick clearing his throat. "Hello, Councillor. It looks like there was a miscommunication when Tyra was younger. Made a pledge that others would consider a joke. Yet Tyra broke it off with ease. Witnessed by me, and only moments ago, the commander himself recognized me as a member of the council." Looked at each other, and the lone woman there, Councillor Mira, leaned forward. "Commander Fry, maybe you don't know. That pledges given to children are particularly binding in our culture because they are seen as innocent. With all due respect, councillors should have motives free from adult influences." With careful word choice, Derek responded, "On Earth, adults frequently make humorous promises to toddlers without the idea that they'll be interpreted literally. It's a way of showing affection," intriguing whispered Councillor. "Then, honor undoubtedly transcends cultural barriers, and a man in your position needs to recognize the significance of what he said." Derek felt confined to dismissing Tira's assertion would be blatantly disrespectful to Lumerian traditions and could jeopardize the partnership his people have forged. Accepting it would require committing to a relationship, possibly even marriage, with a lady he finds difficult to build. Just now, he looked at Tyra, who was observing him with those fierce violet eyes. Perhaps there was something alluring about her, a self-assurance and intelligence that transcended her remarkable looks. Commander Fry could respect the compromise offered by Councillor Duran, a younger member, with progressive ideas, spirit of his pledge within a structured courtship period, which would enable both parties to ascertain whether they are actually. Tyra's smile brightened. And I think this commander is suitable. When Derek noticed his opportunity, he decided that a courting would give him time to come up with a diplomatic solution without harming. Theron said, I would be honored to court Lady Tyra in accordance with Lumerian tradition, without any immediate offense. Clearly eased, the customary time frame is 3 moon cycles. You will take part in a number of ceremonial activities, spend time getting to know one another, and with a stern glance at Derek, Mira concluded, either party may quit without dishonor provided there is reasonable incompatibility. Derek nodded, comprehending the implication that couldn't merely perform the gestures required to show sincere effort as they exited the council room. Tyra put her arm through his, and the contact made him feel warm all of a sudden. You did a great job with that, stated in a tone that suggested amusement for someone attempting to break his pledge. Derek raised, yes. Her fingers tightened a little on her eyebrow, which made me wonder how transparent I am. His arm, but it doesn't matter to me because 3 cycles is enough time for you to learn what I already know. And what she stopped turning to face him. And when he stood near, he saw silver flecks in her violet eyes that resembled stars. Our wonderfully matching twilight sky caused her voice to drop to an intimate tone that chilled him from a biological and psychological standpoint in every manner that matters. Derek was temporarily stunned and unable to speak, taken aback by her candor and the unexpected, irresistible pull he felt. He had never met a woman like Tyra, whether she was human or not. You seem quite. The use of his confidence for someone who hardly knows me, he eventually managed to say. Oh, but I do know you, Derek Fry. I have studied you for years, your service record, your published papers on Cross, said the first name in an oddly intimate way. Species engineering concepts, including your Confederation press interviews, I'm nothing if not committed. That's thorough. She continued to walk, leading him down a tomorrow is our first courtship ritual, says the corridor adorned with living plants that appear to react to their presence. Formal dress is essential for the ceremony of intentions in the evening. I don't remembering to begin so quickly, Derek said, but he didn't really disagree. Tyra's mouth formed a difficult yet seductive smile, asking, Are you Commander? Why wait for what is inevitable when you're not a man of action? Before he could reply, they arrived at the intersection where their paths would diverge, leading him to the human quarter and her to her family's compound until tomorrow. As she turned to go, she added over her shoulder and said, letting go of his arm, Derek, you look great in formal wear. I'm looking forward to. Derek saw you in it and watched her walk, appreciating the poise and assurance in her step, but he knew he was in danger. For the first time since she entered his hangar that morning, he permitted her to do so, not only tactfully, but also personally, himself to think about the potential that this unforeseen circumstance would take him in a direction he hadn't expected. And more, Derek changed the collar of his dress uniform, which is disturbing, but he might not mind. The bioluminescent bloom's light catches the polished emblems of the human expeditionary force. The ceremony of intentions, which lined the route to the Grand Pavilion, was reportedly more elaborate than he had expected. To observe the first official courtship ceremony between a human and one, dignitaries from all around Lumeria had convened. Of their own nervous commander, Lieutenant Parker stumbled into place next to him, appearing uneasy despite just wondering what I've gotten myself into, Derek said, referring to the formal dress. Acknowledging a group of Lamrian officials who were observing him with unmasked interest. Lamaran Parker added, dropping his voice. There's a rumor around the base that your prospective bride isn't just any. She is reportedly the niece of High Counselor Theron and the heir to the prestigious Seagraphy Guild, which is among their greatest. Derek stopped short when discussing important institutions. So why am I only now learning about them? Parker shrugged, and intelligence merely confirmed that the guild is in charge of everything. Lamaran's ships may traverse paths that other species contemplate thanks to deep space navigation charts in this area. Too risky, fuck. Derek went back to walking, his thoughts racing. And this made all the difference. In addition to being a personal issue, a union with Tira would signify a substantial political partnership between. The Grand Pavilion, with its translucent dome, emerged, revealing humanity and one of Lumria's most potent factions. Under it, hundreds of Lumrians mixed with their white, throbbing with gentle blue light. Tira stood in the middle of a sea of ethereal beauty made up of lavender skin and hair. Her gown, which looked to be made from starlight itself, clung to her curves before flowing to Derek's surprise. Her hair was decorated with small gems that caught the light like liquid silver on the floor. The light with each motion, as though sensing his presence, she turned, and a smile appeared on her face as they met across the crowd. Commander Fry's lips curled as she started to approach him with intent. She said, "You look exactly as I imagined you would," with a warmth that seemed reserved for him alone. "May have brought up your political status," he said softly, holding her hand, which was warm and smooth. Tyra's eyes glistened with laughter more than he anticipated. "If it had changed anything, I'm happy. Did she not draw him in with her aroma, which smelled like vanilla and exotic spices? Tonight isn't about..." Before he could reply, a chime rang in the throng, indicating that politics is about intentions. Counselor, Theron moved forward in his ceremonial robes, which were glistening with inlaid. "Finally, we see Tyra's ambitions being announced tonight. Commander Derek Fry of the Earth Thronon and Thanaris, the Stellar Guild's successor, declared me, this first step on the path to union is sacred among our people," his voice echoing throughout the pavilion. With hundreds of eyes on him, Derek could almost feel the pressure of anticipation. This went beyond simply keeping your word or negotiating strange traditions, was regarding the two species' future interaction. Ron gestured, and a servant presented a small. "The seas of truth in a dish full of glowing liquid will show the true objectives of both commanders," as Derek, the one who made the pledge that you would speak first, paused and then dipped his fingers into the chilly liquid, and to his surprise, it started to emit waves of light as it grew brighter. "Declare your plans to Tyra on the surface, following their own instructions, Derek," he said, with a surprising level of candor after looking into Tira's waiting eyes, "and I plan to honor in keeping with my pledge, I will approach this romance with candor and respect, learning your ways and sharing mine. Find out whether what separates us is deserving of the connection you desire." The bowl's contents flashed spectacularly. Casting Tira moved nearer, her fingers joining his, and the crowd erupted in applause as his face shone in golden light. The liquid in the bowl instantly reacted, swirling around their linked hands in patterns of growing complexity. "I want to demonstrate to Derek Fry that our encounter wasn't a coincidental one, but a meeting of fates," she continued, her gaze never leaving his. "I'll demonstrate that a woman's yearning for a spouse who reflects the qualities she once admired as a youngster has grown into strength, inventiveness, and integrity that I have consistently observed in him." The liquid, Derek had to squint as the light flashed between their fingers. "The waters have spoken," Theron said, as the audience gasped simultaneously. "The intentions are pure and resonant. Let the courtship proceed." Because, after the ceremonial wedding ended and the pavilion was crowded with music, Talera escorted Derek to a more private little cove with a view of the twin moons of Lumria's capital city. "Give everything a strange shine?" Derek asked. "Do they really detect deception?" Tara laughed. Their bioelectronic responses to music-like sounds result in stronger emotional states. When she traced the emblem on his chest with her fingers, your reply was heated. So was yours, he shot back, startled by his own audacity as he caught her straying hand. What did you mean that our meeting wasn't a coincidence? My father was the chief engineer who, she said, as her countenance softened, worked with your team 10 years ago, and he frequently discussed the human approach to challenges, which may be creative at times. When I saw you that day, you represented beauty in his efficiency, and her free hand reached out to touch his face. Derek was tremendously affected by the realization of all he valued in your species. Her pursuit of him had a true quality that went beyond a child's whims or political advantage, and now he questioned, keenly conscious of her proximity and the warmth of her touch. And now I saw the man, not only the emblem, but his eyes were full with unwavering passion, and I discover that I desire them both, and the gap between them disappeared as their lips initially contacted tentatively before expanding. Despite their disparate physiologies, the kiss grew deeper as her body pressed against his. Derek sensed a bond developing between them that went beyond simple physical attraction, something fundamental yet deep. Tyra's eyes deepened to deep purple as they eventually parted, both of them breathing heavily. The next ritual isn't planned for tomorrow, she muttered to him. Perhaps we could carry on our cultural exchange. In private, Derek was aware that he was at a turning point, where what had started out as diplomatic wrangling had turned into much more intricate and alluring. Lead the way, he murmured. Derek awoke to the soft touch of Lumaria's eldest son coming through Tyra's own gossamer curtain chambers. The previous night's events came flooding back. Their intense meeting had been enlightening. Their bodies had discovered a perfect balance between Lumrian grace and human passion, natural rhythm in spite of their disparate biological backgrounds, each of which has discovered surprising Tuara, slept soundly next to him, her snow-white hair spilling over the pillow as she reveled in the other's touch. Derek felt as he watched her, her lavender skin nearly glowing in the morning light. Something changed inside of him. What had started out as diplomatic duty was evolving into true love. Careful not to wake terror, the commune buzzed insistently from the floor where his uniform lay discarded, quietly said, "Lunctant," after slipping off the bed and retrieving it. Parker sounded anxious and urgent, saying, "Commander, we have a situation. The 3 crew members were hurt when the Horizon was sabotaged, and one critical Derek's blood turned cold. Are you sabotaging the newest vessel? A collaborative human Lumrian engineering project? Undoubtedly, the propulsion system's security was purposefully hacked." At 0200 hours, the video shows a Lumaran entering the engine room. "I'll be there." After 20 minutes, Derek hung up the phone and turned to see Tala sitting up. Even though she had barely woken up, the sheet tugged about her, keeping her eyes vigilant. "Your ship was attacked," she said. "I didn't need to answer the question you heard," so she got out of bed and moved fluidly. Thanks to a wall-mounted console, the Guild keeps an eye on every ship in Lumrian's area. The Horizon's emergency, a 3-dimensional diagram of the damaged spacecraft, was shown on the console when the systems were activated 3 minutes ago. Derek briefly approached, pulsating red to highlight the afflicted areas. Before concentrating on the exhibition, I was sidetracked by the curvature of Tira's naked shoulder, saying, "This is more detailed than our own." Analyzing the damage pattern, he added, "Diagnostics. The Guild sees everything in our skies." Her fingers danced across the interface, saying, "The damage pattern shows deliberate sabotage of the human design, so this was no accident. Components." A person attempting to portray human engineering as defective, Derek indicated that he was already considering the ramifications with his tactical mind. Seeking to sow division among our people, Talira turned to him, expression grave. "There are groups that are against our partnership, and who would be especially unsettled by our intimate relationship." Derek started packing his clothing, his thoughts racing. I have to get, I'll accompany you to the shipyard. Tara went to her closet and picked out. Due to a guild oversight, she chose to wear a functional jumpsuit instead of her customary exquisite clothes. Power to obtain all technical information that could be used to identify the saboteur, as when a fresh alarm sounded on Talora's interface. She scowled as she read it. "What is it?" Derek said, observing. "Her worry is that we've been called to a High Council emergency meeting. It seems that our rushed courtship has expressed worries." Derek stopped putting his uniform on and sped up. "We're following." Her purple cheeks were deepened by the customary rites, but they were customarily physical. Derek blushed, because intimacy happens after the third rite rather than the first. I was her lips, but I didn't know about that specific technique. Curved in a cheeky grin, he commented gratefully. "Despite the serious situation, I chose to ignore it, rebellious." She went over to adjust his collar for the right reason, but now we're under fire from both sides. Derek moaned in a courteous manner. "Admiral Kensington has asked to join the council session via quantum link. Event in a private investigation just prior to breakfast, regarding which terror I had my kitchen program to make 2 hot cups of Terran coffee after pressing a panel that revealed a tiny cove. Synthesize it." Derek received the cup with gratitude and sipped the unexpectedly genuine brew. "Did you not thoroughly study humans? I told you that I had been preparing for this day for years." Her face softened. "Even so, I acknowledge that the intimate moment surpasses my research on you." Was cut off by yet another notification, this time a security warning that flashed red across her console. What did Derek do next? "Examine it." As she read the alarm security detected, Tira's face darkened. An attempt to get illegal access to my guild database personal profile. My medical records from last night were being accessed by someone. When her eyes met his, Lumerian medical systems instantly scanned and documented any notable biological changes, significant and dramatic, involving the first close encounter with a non-Larian species. Derek was instantly struck by the implications. Someone is aware of us, and they are not only interested in threats, they are also motivated to attack security systems. Only 3 nations possess the technical capacity to undertake such a military breach, according to Tira's voice. She mentioned intelligence, the Science Directorate, or the Purist Covenant. They have opposed integration with a political organization that aims to preserve the genetic purity of Lumrians. Derek examined his sidearm, a habit he had developed from years of interacting with different species since we joined the Galactic Confederation. Military duty. Therefore, there is political scrutiny and possible sabotage. There is a xenophobic group that is specifically targeting us. Is there anything more I should know before we leave? Talora's Derek nearly missed the unconscious hand gesture that went to her abdomen, but there is nothing that can wait till after. Something in her tone made him stop, but Parker sent him another urgent message once we resolved the immediate situation, commanded his attention, begging him to wait for whatever Tyra wasn't telling him. "Let's go," he replied, holding out his hand. "It seems that I have a ship to repair, a saboteur to capture, and a pledge to protect." Tarara clasped his hand just before lunch and held it firmly and comfortingly. Afterward, neither of them saw the tiny drone that separated as they left her chambers from the ceiling and kept its recording eye firmly focused on the human Lumrian duo at a clear distance. In contrast to the ceremonial setting, the High Council chamber was tense as Derek and Tira entered. The 7 council members sat in a room that felt like a trial today, stone-faced at their high chairs, when Admiral Kensington, a severe woman with steel grey hair, appeared in a holographic projection. A Lumerian man with hair hovering to one side was standing on the other side. Derek hadn't prior to this. His stance was uncompromising, and his hatred was hardly contained. With a gesture that lacked his customary warmth, Fry Lady Thaneris High Councillor Theron acknowledged them. "Please take your positions as they made." Their way to the middle of the room, Tala muttered, "The man is Councillor Valon, the Purist Covenant's leader, is here because alarming. Admiral Kensington's hologram flickered before Derek could reply. She said, "Commander Fry, I know you've increased your engagement." With Admiral Derek responded respectfully, standing at the center of the Lumrian diplomatic procedure without the required authorization. Note that military authorization does not apply to my personal connections, but it does when they involve. During a sabotage crisis, Kensington, the heir to a strategically important foreign institution, aggressively retaliated. Counsel when Valen spoke, his voice had the melodic sound of all Lumrian men, yet it was tinged with disdain. Draws attention to the fact that the timing is dubious at best and traitorous at worst. Derek was treacherous, and I didn't see how the human vessel was sabotaged. A few hours after Commander Fry had engaged in prohibited biological warfare, Villain stopped his speech to the Council instead of Derek. Communication with our guild heir. The relationship is clear, and that's ridiculous. Tyra, if anything. The Alliance Union Volans is strengthened by our union. Councillor Theron held up a hand to signal stillness as your eyes narrowed, allowing you to confess to the physical offense. We don't have any proof that Commander Fry was involved in the sabotage. Therefore, allegations are premature, Valen stated. Our security systems captured an unlawful broadcast from Lady after turning on a holographic display. Shortly before the tragedy, the display displayed a data packet traveling from Thenaris's chambers to the human vessel. Dererick sensed the general mistrust in the room, turned toward Talera's house in the horizon, saying, "That's impossible," Terra remarked as she moved to look at the data. "My systems are protected by guild standards. Maybe your..." The veil of thinly veiled disdain implied that judgment was weakened. Derek took the lead. "And if I may, the transmission signature isn't consistent with either Lumrian or ordinary human protocols." Admiral Kensington, leaning forward in her hologram, seems to be using a third-party encryption. Commander Fry is, yes, this exhibits the characteristics of Sagarian mercenaries. Councillor Mira asked why someone who intended to frame both humans would hire off-world mercenaries. Lumrians. Derek recommended a person who gains from the communication. Between our convenient idea that was nearly as convenient as yours was mocked by people's violin. Abrupt romance with the only Lumrian who might be able to provide people access to our stellar navigation secrets, which is adequate, Councillor Theon cautioned. But Violin went on. The biological problem is more serious than the sabotage. Our genetic line was contaminated, and Villain accused Tira, the doctors, she has permitted human genetic material to mix with her own, and scans don't lie. A startling mutter went through the chamber. Tyra's face turned a deeper shade of mauve, but she refused to back down, saying, "My." She firmly stated that while personal decisions are not subject to Covenant approval, they are when they pose a harm to our species, purity, Vale came across. Humans have just been traveling interstellarly for a century, and their genetic stability is unsubstantiated and, at best, dubious developmental trajectory. Derek sensed his. Despite our lack of patience, our evolutionary route brought us to the skies on our own. Counselor and into this room as equals rather than subjects, Villain chuckled sourly. Your children are playing with your type, who still wage conflicts over skin color. Admiral Kensington interrupted Commander Fry, who represents technology that you hardly comprehend. Your own biases are acknowledged, Counselor, but they have no bearing on this inquiry, Tyra. She staggered next to Derek, reaching for her stomach, and he stabilized her while casting a worried look. Are you all yes? He muttered. We must talk in private. She instantly mumbled. Hi. Councillor Theron saw Tyra's uneasiness and suggested that we take a short break, but Villain insisted that the guild heir seems ill, and according to our medical procedures, I need to be examined right away. Tarara stated firmly that she needed an examination, but Dererick could sense her quivering a little beneath his touch and Balin's eyes, reduced with an abrupt realization. Unless the human contamination has went farther than we anticipated, and he approached the council to request a complete Lady Daenerys' biological scan right away, You have no right to make any demands, Theon replied, getting up from his chair. I have the authority when it comes to. Regarding genetic purity, Volin maintained that the Covenant procedures are sufficiently transparent. Tarara's voice suddenly pierced the room. You want to know the truth, Counselor? Yes, I joined, with Commander Fry in the conventional manner, and indeed, something extraordinary has happened. Dereric examined her, bewildered. She stood up straight and faced the council with dignity. I am carrying a child, a human, she said. Derek looked at Tarara in disbelief as the room erupted in commotion. Lan kid. After one night of impossible, how could you possibly have managed to reel a child? Apparently, Terra said, as Villain yelled over the den. Our species are not compatible, declared with amazing poise that they are my guild medical implant, and it was verified. This morning, the genetic material of humans and Lummerans has effectively blended. Admiral Kensington's hologram flickered for the first time in history as she leaned forward, asking, Commander Fry, did you understand this? No, Admiral, Dereric replied candidly, still assimilating the information. I'm just as shocked as you are. This alters everything, Darren remarked softly, the consequences obviously weighing heavily on him. I moved to quarantine because, as you said, cold fury turns this from a diplomatic crisis to a biological hazard. Until we can ascertain the nature of this, both the human and Lady Aberration Dereric moved closer to Tyra in a protective manner. Anyone attempting to isolate us will find it to be very challenging, and there was a noticeable sense of tension in the room when a junior officer abruptly entered the room and interrupted the High Counselor standoff. We've located the saboteur, and the officer displayed a facial recognition in a surveillance photo of a hooded person setting a gadget in their engine room confirms. All eyes were on Vin because it was Taran Voss, a well-known purist Covenant associate, whose calmness briefly wavered before he recovered, proving that nothing happens unless he acts on his own initiative. Inform her that he accepted cash from your guild for a challenge in getting data on her wrist gadget. Valen's face twisted in anger yesterday when she saw my personal account. You dare access my... The guild observes everything in private, including treachery, and reminds him coolly he has been promoted to lieutenant. When Dereric stormed into the security center, Parker bitterly reported that the Valen caused an electromagnetic when they attempted to arrest him. Pulse disabled the security systems for 3 minutes, which was just long enough to... Dereric vanished, slamming his fist against the console, and Parker's expression informed him that the guards had been located and she was being taken to medical for protective surveillance. Unconscious, we must presume that Valen took her. I ask all people and Lumrian security personnel to search. Despite the storm blazing inside of him, Derek ordered the city in a deadly quiet voice, and grant me access to the systems for recording guilt that have already been completed, High Counselor. Theron remarked as she entered the room with. The elderly statesman appeared disturbed, but determined to have Tuara's guild implanted, according to a number of Lumerian officers. Let us find her, but Valen is smart enough to have taken precautions. Although, he's a zealot. Dereric nodded, pushing himself to think strategically rather than emotionally. Meticulous. He won't take the chance of removing her from the world by going through too many checkpoints. The Covenant keeps a research center in the area he oversees that has medical facilities. One of Theron's tools, Northern Mountains, is formally available for genetic preservation research. That's a 3-hour travel by traditional means, Theron observed that Derek was already approaching the door. Then we don't have much. I need all the information you have about that facility's assault shuttle counselor at the time Parker prepared it on a nearby display. The hologram of Admiral Kensington, the defenses commander, came to life. This is a Lumrian internal issue. You lack permission to conduct a military operation. Derek resorted to confront his superior. His visage remains unwavering with reverence. Admiral, with or without my future wife and unborn child, I'm pursuing them. Permission. The Admiral took the time to carefully consider the diplomatic ramifications of a human military action. will be insignificant in comparison to what might occur if the first human Lumerian Derek finished hurting the youngster. But this is about more than just our relationship, Admiral. Kensington's grim face softened a little. You have an hour to get them back, Commander, or else I won't have any options. Derek turned to Theron to deny your activities, but I need your Theon promise that the Guild would have the fastest scout ship and navigators who are willing to assist you. Stands with you, Commander. 40 minutes later, Derek navigated the rugged mountain in a sleek Lumrian scout ship. Beside him, a young man named Nan sat on the northern continent of Lumria. 3 kilometers ahead, a navigator's fingers danced across the ship's sensor array, allowing me to detect odd energy oscillations. In line with medical stasis fields, Nan reported, and Derek sadly nodded. That's them. He turned on the communication Parker. Remember to remain non-lethal and bring your guys in from the south. The commander's tactics are not copied by foes, but only by misinformed citizens. Parker replied, I might make an exception for Violen, but Derek, no exceptions. As they arrived at the facility in a hushed voice, he reiterated that he shared the sentiment that we do this by the book. Derek was astounded by how ill-defended the dome-shaped building, which seemed to have no weaponry, was snuggled against. A cliff wall. Limited security sensor deployments that they never anticipated finding. Navan as I studied Derek's ideas, I realized that the Covenant functions more via persuasion and secrecy than through military power. In a tiny meadow, Derek pulled the scout ship down and turned on his tactical display life indicators, which showed 12 people. Most Nevin emphasized a portion of the design with a single isolated life sign in the middle chamber. Tyra. Derek confirmed that a woman with odd biometric readings was seeing a spike in. Feeling relieved that she was still alive, he adjusted his armor and examined his non-lethal pulse weapon. He would remain on board the ship if contact Thorin. Neon nodded through his expression, but we won't be returning for 20 minutes. Demonstrated his anxiety like the majority of Lumrian men do. And since he had never had martial training, Derek slipped quietly through. The thick vegetation encircling the establishment where his military training would take place would result in a Derek was able to sneak in through a maintenance access point, Nan, thanks to a diversion at the southern entrance, as sirens sounded, signaling an intrusion at the main door. Derek realized that the plan had worked well, entered the building through an unprotected service hatch to find dazzling lighting, clinically pure white walls, and after his tactical demonstration, Derek moved along the hallways while the faint buzz of sophisticated medical equipment played. He came across one guard outside the Covenant, dodging the few members who were hurrying to react to Parker's diversion. Medical chamber, and with a swift, stealthy takedown, they sent him away. The door then swung open to reveal a nightmare Tyra. Valin stood next to her, controlling her as she was unconscious on a hospital platform surrounded by bright diagnostic fields. Derek gave the order to step away from her, directing his pulse weapon trained on controls on a sophisticated device aimed at her midsection. Unsurprised, Valin the Lumrian said, Commander Fry, you have a reputation for. This is the end of resourcefulness, Valen. You've lost, haven't I? Valen pointed to the apparatus that will separate and neutralize all of her human DNA, using this genetic purification beam. Mechanism. Derek's finger tightened on the trigger, shutting it down. The procedure has already started, so you don't comprehend. What's at risk? Phelan demanded in a tone that was almost imploring. Our genetic ancestry has been pure for 50,000 years. A hybrid would alter everything. Change isn't something to, taking a step forward, Derek remarked, is something to cherish, because that child is a bridge between the future, and our people are a bridge that Balin sneered at, or the start of the end, for humanity. In 3 generations, there wouldn't be any more pure Larians, because we are ambitious and aggressive. Humanity has learned from its mistakes, Derek retorted, and we want collaboration rather than domination. There was something in Derek's voice that caused Valen to pause. You really think that I do? Derek dropped his weapon. Somewhat, and you know in your heart that I'm correct. If people had intended to conquer, we wouldn't have invested 10 years in creating an alliance. We would have arrived with warships rather than diplomats, demonstrating Valen's resolve. Dereric pointed toward the Covenant doctrines, which are founded on fear rather than truth. Look at her, Tira. She chose me not because I forced or dominated her, but because she perceived something valuable that aligned with her personal principles. Parker's team's presence was heralded by a disturbance in the corridor. Velon looked at the door and then back at Derek. His internal counselor, Dereric, stated in a low voice to make the correct decision once the conflict was evidently resolved. After a brief pause, Valen moved away from the controls since the human genetic material was not fully purified. As Dereric moved to Terra's side to check her vital signs, he felt a wave of relief that she was still viable. Parker's crew gently restrained Valen and the other Covenant members. Derek, confirming more to himself than Valen, raised Tara off the platform, her eyes opening and slowly focused on his face. She said, "Derek, that you two are her hand," he reassured her, holding her to his chest. "Baby safe." Discovered his feeble squeezing. "You always came for me," he said, promising to spread the word. He made a joke pledge years ago, but the weight of the commitment is far more binding. 6 months following the altercation with Valen Dereric, Dereric stood at the observation window of his childhood house in Colorado, observing Tyra as she looked around the garden in awe of how far along her pregnancy had come. Her slim body is now able to gracefully accommodate their child's growth, and the medical teams from both. The complete compatibility of their genetic makeup had shocked worlds, something that ought to have been statistically impossible, Admiral Kensington said, joining Dereric at the window. "She's adapting well to Earth." The older woman had become an unexpected ally, championing their cause within the Terran government. "Than I anticipated," Dereric concurred. Although she still finds it incomprehensible that humans allow plants to grow haphazardly rather than in cultural differences speaking, Kensington laughed at the beautiful geometric designs. Tomorrow, the Lumerian delegation will arrive for the High Counselor ceremony. Valon is fully assisting with the investigation, and Theron offers his regards. She gave him a data tablet and said, "His testimony has been invaluable in dismantling the more radical purist cells. According to your son's most recent scans, the medical staff is describing his neurological development as unprecedented." Dereric examined the pictures with a mix of admiration and amazement when their boy kid shown indications of the consequences of combining the characteristics of both species, human adaptability and Lumrian cognitive patterns, were stupefying. "Have they found any odd skills?" he inquired, remembering Kensington reassured him that the worries expressed by scientists from both realms were nothing dangerous, but his brainwave patterns indicate that he might acquire psychic talents akin to those of the Lumerian mythology. Derek whispered the greatest of genetic memory repair, which was lost millennia ago. Outside of both worlds, Tira had found a butterfly, which made her laugh with glee. Streaming through the glass, the scene gave Derek a sense of satisfaction he had never thought he would have when he'd made 10 years. Ago, he made a casual vow to a young alien girl. "I never thanked you properly." The Admiral's typically severe demeanor tempered compassion, and Kensington's backing for us prevented the stars by accepting it and being afraid of the unidentified leader. She verified her watch. "I should make the last security arrangements for tomorrow." Derek joined Tira in the garden. She smiled brightly at him, her violet eyes glimmering with anticipation. "Your world is so. He feels it too," she replied, taking his hand and putting it on her abdomen where their son had kicked hard. "He has a lot of energy here," Dereric said with pride, much like his mother. And Tarara snuggled against him, her body fitting his well despite her transformation, stubborn like his father. "Numbers have been on my mind." "Oh, Talon," she murmured, meaning bridge between. Derek tested the name and discovered that it flowed naturally, in the realms of ancient Lumrian. Even if it came from an extraterrestrial Talon Fry, I enjoyed how her fingers entwined with his. What started with a child's wish in a soldier's chest will be formally formalized tomorrow. You're anxious for the ceremony, but he kissed her forehead to make her the first human landchild's father, was frightened and laughed at the sound. You can confront armed purists without flinching, just as in music, but fatherhood. He acknowledged that some problems cannot be resolved by tactical thinking, so we will work together to overcome them. She became increasingly concerned as the expert stated that he might acquire skills that neither of our species fully comprehends. Good Dererick asserted firmly that the universe needs fresh viewpoints in order for us to develop, but their discussion was cut off. Derek tensed as an unexpected arrival, a sleek diplomatic shuttle, descended near the landing site. Telega reassured him, "It's all right," as his instinctual old habits were dying hard. The shuttle's ramp extended, and one individual recognized the vehicle and said, "It's my father." Despite his obvious enthusiasm, the elegant Lumrian male emerged with a stately demeanor. Throughout the entire Voluane event, Chief Engineer Thinaris had been off-world. Upon his return, he discovered his Tal yelled out to him as his daughter, who was betrothed to a human and carrying the first inner-species kid, a father, moved to greet him. With the formal Lumrian show of respect, etiquette is completely disregarded. "My lovely darling," he murmured, his voice full with emotion, as he embraced his daughter with very genuine enthusiasm. "You're glowing." He turned to face Derek, who was examining him closely before grinning, saying, "Commander Fry, the human who fulfilled his commitment." "Sir," Derek said formally, but was drawn into an equally impassioned Daenerys urged. "None of that sir business," saying, "We're family now," pulled a little elaborate box out of his robes and said, "I brought something for tomorrow's ceremony. A family heirloom." 2 rings of an iridescent metal that was unidentified on Earth were found inside the box. Thinaris, who wrote in flowing Luma writing, clarified, "Forged our family has been passing these down for centuries in the heart of a dying star." Tira gasped gently, "Father, I'm waiting for unions of real significance." Then retorted, "And what could be more historic than this? These are meant for historical alliances," suggesting that the future of both of our worlds develops inside of you the following day, under a representatives from 2 cultures came together to observe what many had believed to be an unthinkable event. The celebration included customs from both cultures to celebrate the merger of humans and Lumrians. With the binding of essences from Lumrian ceremony and the exchange of rings from Earth custom, Dererick stood tall in his garment. Uniform, observing Tyra's arrival in a dress that combined ceremonial silver with human white tiara. She had never looked more stunning, and her pregnancy added even more radiance to her already glowing appearance as they shared their Dererick, thought back on the unlikely voyage that followed his somber and deep vows, which were passionate and melodic, had brought them here by coincidence, meeting a determined woman who made a reckless vow. "With this ring, I fulfill my promise to the person who crossed the stars to claim what was promised," he added, sliding the starry putting a metal band on her finger. Not due to remarks made a few years ago, but because of the love that blossomed between them. "I claim what was always meant to be mine with this ring," she replied. She put the matching band on his finger, her eyes glimmering with emotion, not out of childish want, but because 2 souls were able to identify one another via the vacuum. After the officials declared them to be one under the laws of their son kicked hard in both realms, seemingly endorsing the antics, and Tyra laughed, putting, "That agrees," she muttered, when Derek's fingers passed over the area as the festivities went on all around them. They briefly separated to see the interaction of people and Lumrians. Adversaries, wary allies, and now possibly genuine friends. "Do you recall what you said to me on the hangar's first day?" Leaning comfortably on his shoulder, Tyr inquired, "I think it was something, and here we are." Dererick smiled and said, "About marrying you when you grew up." She turned in his arms. A human male with a calm yet playful grin joked that he would marry a young alien girl when she grew up. Derek whispered, holding her close above them, the best decision I never knew I was making, as she came back to claim him. Two worlds and the moon of Earth ascended together with a visiting diplomatic ship from Lumrian. Similar to how two species now share a future connected by a bond, the promise made in love and fulfilled in terrors. Womb caused Talon's developing psyche to alter once more, impacting his parents in ways they both loved and didn't fully comprehend. The bridge between worlds was constructed on the basis of a child's awe, a soldier's generosity, and the unexpected when they reunited among the stars. A miracle blossomed.